The blues that built rock. The legacy of Sister Rosetta Tharpe. All right, music lovers, gather around. If you're talking about rock and roll, we've got to go back to the roots, to the soul, to the sound that built everything. Everything we love today. And if we're talking about the roots of rock, there's one name we cannot ignore, the Sister Rosetta Tharpe. Long before Chuck Berry's duck walked, before Elvis shook his hips, Sister Rosetta was tearing it up with an electric guitar in hand, playing with a fire that would inspire generations. And oh yeah, she was doing it in the 1930s. Now, some of you might be thinking, wait, an electric guitar in the 1930s? That's right. Before rock was even a thing, before distortion and power chords, there was Sister Rosetta Tharpe, standing on stage, shredding and singing like her life depended on it. She was a pioneer, a visionary, and most importantly, she was a force of nature. She didn't just influence rock music, she helped invent it. Her sound was something completely new. It had the fire of gospel, the storytelling of the blues, and a punch of something that would soon become rock and roll. And trust me, the world was not ready. But here's the thing, she wasn't just a great musician, she was a show woman. She played her guitar like it was an extension of her soul. She commanded the stage like nobody else, and she did it at a time when women, especially black women, weren't supposed to be rock stars. So today we're diving deep into her story, her music, and her massive influence on rock and roll. If you love the blues, if you love rock, if you love music that moves you, this is a story you need to hear. Buckle up, folks, because we're about to take a ride through the life, music, and lasting influence of the godmother of rock and roll. The gospel roots of rock. Now, let's take it all the way back. Sister Rosetta Tharpe wasn't just a guitarist, she was a powerhouse, a woman who blended the raw emotion of the blues with the spirit of gospel, creating a sound nobody had heard before. Born in 1915 in Cotton Plant, Arkansas, Rosetta Newman grew up in the church, and she took the gospel fire and turned it all the way up. By the time she was 6, she was already playing the guitar like a seasoned pro. Her mother, Katie Bell Newman, was a traveling evangelist and a fiery preacher spreading the gospel through music and sermons. Young Rosetta wasn't just learning how to play, she was absorbing an entire tradition of storytelling, rhythm, and spiritual power. Her performances were more than just music, they were experiences, lifting people to their feet, making them clap, stomp, and shout in praise. From a young age, she knew that music had the power to move people physically, emotionally, and spiritually. But Tharpe didn't just play gospel music, she revolutionized it. While most gospel musicians stuck to the traditional acoustic instruments and choir arrangements, she picked up her guitar and played it with a swagger that was unheard in the church settings. Her style wasn't just skillful, it was bold, electrifying, and filled with bluesy bends and rhythmic flourishes that would later define rock and roll. Her mother's evangelistic work took them from small churches in Arkansas to bigger cities like Chicago, where Rosetta was exposed to a whole new world of music. The blues were everywhere, on the streets, in the clubs, in the voices of legendary musicians like Big Bill Bronzy and Memphis Minnie. But while the blues told stories of struggle and hardship, gospel was about hope and salvation. Tharpe saw no reason why the two had to stay separate. But at the time when blues was considered the devil's music by many religious leaders, Tharpe embraced both sides and brought the passion and fire of gospel into the blues, and the soul and the grit of blues into gospel. It was a fusion, a mixture of holy and rebellious, and it shook people to their core. Her performances were filled with high energy strumming, rapid picking solos, and vocals that soared with both power and conviction. See, rock music didn't just appear out of nowhere. She was born out of something real, something raw. It was about pain and celebration, struggle and joy, all wrapped up in a sound that could shake a building. And Sister Rosetta, she was the first to take that sound and make it electric. By the late 1920s, Rosetta's reputation as a child prodigy had spread. She was invited to performances at larger revivals, tent meetings and gospel gatherings. Audiences were stunned by her ability. She wasn't just another church singer. She was a force of nature. She played like a man, sang like a preacher and commanded the stage like no one else. But while church crowds loved her energy, they also weren't sure what to make of her. Blues-inspired gospel style. Some saw it as too aggressive, too radical, but it didn't stop her. Her big break came when she moved to New York City in the late 1930s. The world of music was changing and Sister Rosetta was ready to shake things up. She signed with Decca Records in 1938 and recorded some of her most famous songs, including Rock Me and This Train. These weren't just gospel songs. They had a swing, a groove, and energy that blurred the lines between gospel and blues and the early rumblings of rock and roll. She was ahead of her time and the world was just beginning to catch up. She was playing gospel, but the way she played it, it wasn't just for churchgoers anymore. It was for everyone. With her gospel roots firmly in the place, Sister Rosetta Tharpe had taken the first step towards reshaping popular music forever. She was still a preacher at heart, but her music was bigger than the church walls. It was meant to be heard, to be felt, and she picked up that electric guitar, and she was about to take it all to the next level. Now, here's where things get really interesting. In the 1930s and most gospel singers are sticking to traditional church music, but not Sister Rosetta. She picks up an electric guitar, one of the first musicians, man or woman, to do so, and she wails on it. She wasn't just strumming chords, she was bending notes, shredding before shredding was even a thing. She didn't just strum along as a compliment. She attacked the guitar using aggressive precise strokes that gave her songs an undeniable energy. She would slide up and down the fretboard, picking individual notes with blazing speed and even mute her strings to create a rhythmic drum-like effect. In doing so, she transformed the guitar from a supporting instrument into a lead voice in gospel music, and a move that would later become the foundation of rock guitar playing. She signed with Decca Records in 1938 and started recording songs like Rock Me and This Train tracks that had the blues grit but with the spiritual passion of gospel. People were blown away. She wasn't just a church singer anymore. She was something new, something wild, something dangerous. There was gospel songs, sure, but they swung with a rhythm and intensity that made them stand out from anything else. Being recorded at the time, her voice soared, her guitar rang out like a thunderstorm, and suddenly she wasn't just playing gospel, she was redefining it. That electric guitar changed everything. It gave her power, it gave her sound, and soon enough people were paying attention. Not just gospel fans, but blues lovers, jazz musicians, and a new generation of artists who would take her style and run with it. Her playing wasn't just innovative, it was theatrical. On stage, she would lean back and wail on her guitar, moving like a rock star before the term even existed. She wasn't just a musician, she was a showwoman. She understood how to engage an audience, how to command a stage, how to make people feel something deep in their bones. She was larger than life, a performer who exuded confidence and joy in every note, and she played. At the time, gospel music was deeply rooted in traditional choir arrangements and piano-led performances. Guitars, especially electric guitars, were seen as instruments of secular worldly music, but Sister Rosetta ignored the rules. She played her gospel music loud, fast, and full of energy, and while some in the church world raised their eyebrows at the electrified approach, she found a whole new audience outside the church. one that was hungry for something fresh and exciting. Her sound caught the attention of secular musicians, and before long she was performing in nightclubs and jazz venues. Something nearly unheard of for a gospel artist. She wasn't afraid to blur the lines between gospel and secular music, and that made her both a revolutionary and a controversial figure. But there was no denying that her music moved people. It was spiritual, yes, but it was also sensational, and it was only a matter of time before other musicians took notice. Her playing was rhythmic, percussive, and fiery. It laid groundwork for rock's greatest guitarists, Chuck Berry, Little Richard, and even Jimi Hendrix. They all owed a debt to Sister Rosetta's pioneering style. Think about this. Before there was Chuck Berry's Duck Walk, before Jimi Hendrix set his guitar on fire, there was Sister Rosetta electrifying audiences with her bold stage presence and raw guitar riffs. She was playing rock and roll before it had a name. She was also one of the first guitarists to use distortion in her playing. When she cranked up her amp and dug into a riff, she created a raw, overdrive sound that would later define rock and blues guitar. This wasn't a polished, clean sound. It was gritty, dirty, and alive, and that's what made it so irresistible. You couldn't just listen to Sister Rosetta. You had to feel her music, and let's talk about her influence. The first generation of rockers, people like Elvis Presley, Johnny Cash, and Jerry Lee Lewis, grew up listening to her records. When they heard her play, they weren't just hearing gospel, they were hearing the future. They took that sound and that energy and made it their own, but it wasn't just rock pioneers who took inspiration from her. Even today, musicians like Jack White, Brittany Howard, and Gary Clark Jr. carry her legacy forward. Whenever you hear fiery blues, rock solo, whenever a guitarist owns the stage, you're hearing echoes of Sister Rosetta. Despite her massive influence, she was often overlooked in discussions about the birth of rock and roll. But make no mistake, without Sister Rosetta Tharpe, rock music as we know it would not exist. She paved the way for every guitarist who ever plugged in, turned up the volume, and played with abandon. So next time you hear an electrifying guitar solo that gives you chills, remember, before rock was rock, before blues were electrified, there was Sister Rosetta Tharpe blending those notes, breaking the rules, and setting the stage for everybody that followed. Now, let's talk about influence. Because if you think Sister Rosetta was just a gospel singer, think again. She shaped everybody, not just in gospel, not just in blues, but in rock and roll, soul and beyond. Her fingerprints are all over the sound of modern music. Even ever heard of Johnny Cash, Elvis Presley, Jerry Lee Lewis? These guys didn't listen to the blues, they listened to her. They didn't just admire her voice, they studied her swagger, her stage presence, her guitar playing, and they didn't just pick up the blues, they picked up Sister Rosetta's fire. Picture a young Elvis sneaking into a concert hall, watching in awe as Sister Rosetta rips through a solo. He'd later say she was one of his biggest inspirations. That swagger, that strut, straight from Sister Rosetta. Elvis wasn't the only one mesmerized by her music. Johnny Cash once called her his favorite singer. Little Richard, another pioneer of rock and roll, grew up listening to Sister Rosetta and modeled much of his sound after her gospel blues fusion. Jerry Lee Lewis, he was captivated by the way she mixed gospel intensity with boogie rhythms. She didn't just inspire rock and roll pioneers, she also shaped future generations. Aretha Franklin, Nina Simone, they grew up listening to her powerful vocals, and when you hear artists like Brittany Howard of Alabama Shakes, or Valerie Jean, that deep, soulful rasp, that's pure Rosetta. Sister Rosetta's influence didn't just stop at vocals. Her guitar playing revolutionized the way musicians approached this instrument. She played loud, she played fast, she played with attitude. That kind of confidence on the guitar wasn't common back in those days. especially not for a woman. But Sister Rosetta wasn't just a musician, she was a trailblazer. And it wasn't just the way she sounded, it was the way she played. Rock's greatest guitarists like Eric Clapton and Jack White have all credited her with paving the way for blues-driven rock guitar. Her innovative guitar style laid the groundwork for Chuck Berry's duck-walking riffs, Jimi Hendrix's distortion-laid solos, and even Keith Richards' blues licks with the Rolling Stones. Every time you hear a guitarist let loose with searing blues rock riff, that's Sister Rosetta's spirit coming through. Let's put it this way: without Sister Rosetta, there's no Chuck Berry. Without Chuck Berry, there's no Beatles. Without the Beatles, well, you get the picture. That's how deep her influence runs. Sister Rosetta was also one of the first crossover artists. She wasn't just a gospel star. She played secular rhythm venues, broke barriers, and reached audiences far beyond the church. She introduced gospel to mainstream America in a way no one had before. And when she performed in the UK in the 1960s, she inspired the blues, the British blues explosion, the same movement that gave us the Rolling Stones, Eric Clapton and Led Zeppelin. Think about it. Sister Rosetta Tharpe was touring England before the Beatles were even famous, and the young musicians who watched her, they took that sound and built an entire movement out of it. Even today, artists across genres carry her legacy forward. Hers soulful gospel-infused rock that's pure as Sister Rosetta. Gary Clark Jr.'s bluesy electrified guitar, that's her influence shining through. Jack White's vintage rock sound straight from her playbook. She wasn't just ahead of her time, she created the time. She didn't just influence rock music, she made it possible. Despite her monumental impact, Sister Rosetta's name was often overlooked in the early discussions of rock history. For decades, her contributions were unappreciated, but in recent years, the music world has started to give her credit she always deserved. In 2018, she was finally inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as an early influencer, cementing her rightful place among the greatest. But let's be real, Sister Rosetta wasn't just an early influencer. She was a pioneer, a revolutionary, a game changer. She didn't just influence rock's biggest names, she made rock's biggest names. Her music was fearless, her performances legendary, her legacy unshakable. So next time you hear a wailing guitar solo, a voice, a rhythm that makes you move, remember where it all started. Sister Rosetta Tharpe wasn't just a chapter in rock history, she wrote the story, and that story, it's still being told. Fast forward to today, and Sister Rosetta Tharpe's legacy is everywhere. From Rock and Roll Hall of Fame to Grammys, she's finally getting the recognition she always deserved. Her name, once sidelined in the history of rock, is now front and center in discussions about the genre's true pioneers. For decades, Sister Rosetta's contributions were overlooked, but her name missing from traditional rock and roll narratives. But the tide has turned. In 2018, she was introduced into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as the early influencer. And that title, that barely scratches the surface of impact. Let's be real, she wasn't just an early influencer, she was the influencer. She didn't just inspire rock and roll, she built the very foundation it stands on. When she was inducted, musicians and fans alike celebrated the long overdue recognition. Legends like Bonnie Raitt, Joan Jett, Tina Turner all cited Sister Rosetta as an essential figure in their own musical journeys. Even Bruce Springfield has referenced her electrifying presence and her fearless approach to performance of something that set the gold standard for what rock should be. And now modern artists are carrying her spirit forward. Acts like Hoza, Yola, and Gary Clark Jr. all channel her bluesy gospel fire in their music. Listen to Holtz's Take Me to the Church, that gospel power, that bluesy grit, that's Sister Rosetta. Listen to Yola's Stand for Myself or Gary Clark Jr.'s searing guitar solos. You'll hear echoes of her influence in every note. Sister Rosetta didn't just shape rock and roll. Her influence blends into everything. Her fearless fusion of gospel and blues created a ripple effect that extended far beyond rock. You hear her spirit in soul, in rock, in R&B, in Indian folk. You hear whenever an artist breaks the rules, whenever someone fuses raw emotion with electric power. And let's not forget, you can see her influence too. The way rock musicians move on stage, the way they own their instruments, the way they command an audience. That started with Sister Rosetta, who played the way female artists, who paved the way for female artists in rock, proving that a woman could shred just as hard, if not harder, than her male counterparts. Every time you see a female guitarist take center stage and own her performance, that's Sister Rosetta's spirit. Still alive and thriving, the renewed recognition of her impact has led to tributes worldwide. Statues, documentaries, and concerts dedicated to her honour have emerged, ensuring that her name is never forgotten again. In the 1920s, have seen a greater push to educate younger generations about her significance, with music programs and history courses finally giving her credit where it's due. Think about kids today grow up learning about Elvis, about Chuck Berry, about Hendrix, but now they're also learning about Sister Rosetta Tharpe. The history books are finally getting it right. Beyond her musical impact, Sister Rosetta's story is one of defiant innovation and breaking barriers. She was a black woman playing guitar louder and faster than most men in the industry. That wasn't ready for her, but she did it anyway. She faced racism, sexism, and pushback from traditional gospel audiences, but she kept playing and she kept pushing it. And now the world finally sees her for the legend she is. So here's the thing, Sister Rosetta Tharpe isn't just a name from the past. She's the future of music too. Every time an artist fuses genres, every time someone shatters expectations, every time a musician dares to be different, she's there. Her legacy isn't just one of music, it's one of fearlessness. She didn't just wait for permission to be great, she was great. She didn't follow the rules, she rewrote them. And rock music as we know it will always carry her name. And so next time you crank up the rock anthem, and next time you hear a killer guitar solo, the next time you see a musician putting their entire soul into a performance, remember where it all started. Remember Sister Rosetta Tharpe, because she's not just part of history, she is rock history. Sister Rosetta Tharpe didn't just play music, she changed it. She took the blues, took gospel and created something brand new. She didn't just inspire rock and roll, she was rock and roll. Her influence didn't fade within time, it grew, spreading like wildfire through generations of musicians who picked up guitars, found their voices and refused to conform. Every time you hear a rectifying guitar riff, an artist breaking genre boundaries, or a performance owning the stage with unapologetic confidence, you're hearing the echoes of Sister Rosetta's legacy. Her playing style is still studied, her music still sampled, and her spirit still lives on in rock's greatest moments. Every guitarist who bends a note with raw emotion, every singer who belts out a chorus like gospel-like intensity, every musician who fuses styles to create something groundbreaking, all of them owe a piece of their artistry to Sister Rosetta Tharpe. She was the spark that ignited the fire of rock, and that fire is still burning, whether it's in blues bars, a rock festival, a gospel choir, or an indie folk ballad. Her influence is everywhere, and it's not just about the sound. Sister Rosetta's presence, her ability to command a stage, to demand attention, to move an audience, set a new standard for what is meant to be a performer. Long before rock stars became larger-than-life figures, she was already larger than life. Today, musicians across the genres continue to honour her impact. Some cover her songs, others channel her energy, and some simply acknowledge that without her, the landscape of popular music would look very different. Her story is finally being told in full, and her name is being spoken alongside the rock greats she influenced. And the best part, she's still inspiring every time a guitarist shreds, every time an artist infuses gospel passion with blues grit, every time someone dares to be different. Her spirit is there, roaring through the speakers. More than just a musical pioneer, she is a symbol of boldness, of fearlessness, of someone who refused to stay in one box, who refused to be limited by what others thought gospel music or a woman with a guitar should be. She didn't just influence rock music, she embodied it. Before it even had a name, her legacy isn't just one of music, it's one of courage. She stood in a male-dominated industry and played harder. She stood in a racially divided world and sang louder. She took a place in music history not because she was allowed to, but because she earned it. And as long as rock and roll exists, as long as there are musicians who play with passion, performers who break the mold, and artists who refuse to be confined, Sister Rosetta Tharpe will never be forgotten. And that's the wrap. Keep those records spinning. Keep the blues alive. And never forget, the roots of rock and roll run deep in the blues. Until next time, keep it loud, keep it raw, keep it real.